I've often asked myself the question, what do we mean when we say that Einstein was a Jew? But first of all, there is his own self-affirmation. He felt himself to be a Jew. He was attached to the prophetic element, I believe, in the Jewish legacy and tradition. He was a Jew in the sense that whatever happened to Jews happened to him. And this, of course, was dramatized by the fact that Nazi Germany couldn't possibly sustain him because he was a Jew. No matter how great was his eminence, he was the victim of the Jewish fate and of the Jewish affliction. And in a sense, his wandering in the later years of his life seemed to symbolize the condition of the Jewish people as a people which had much influence but no power to open a single door.
He never forgave the Germans for what they had done. Never. And there are several very moving short pieces written by him, such as one contribution dealing with the destruction of the ghetto in Warsaw. On the other hand, that was slightly the paradox, he was deeply rooted in the German culture. We always spoke German together, because that is the best way I could follow the nuance of his personality. German was the language in which he was free to modulate and to express himself.
In 1929, in Kaputh, outside of Berlin, Einstein and Elsa built a summer residence which he called his hut. Here he could retreat to nature, work undisturbed, and take his sailboat out on the lake. It was an idyllic place where he felt comfortable, where, Elsa wrote a friend, even the local Nazis loved Einstein. But only 3 summers passed before the Nazis came to power, and while Einstein and Elsa were out of the country, the Nazis raided their home and confiscated their property. The summer home was turned into an Aryan youth house. A year later, the local newspaper advertised his boat for sale. Einstein was never to return to Germany again.
Dr. Einstein, who gave the world its biggest headache, is back in California again with his wife. They've been fog-bound all night in San Pedro Harbor. The professor had a theory as to how they could land, but before he and the captain could figure it out, the fog had all gone away. Now he's going to the Institute of Technology in Pasadena to work with other distinguished scientists. There his theory will be thoroughly discussed and analyzed, and if it is what he says it is, why then everything will be all right, won't it? Of course, it might be possible that he's come here to find out what it's all about.
America held out the hope for freedom to Einstein and others escaping Hitler's persecution. On first impression, Einstein felt that Americans were optimistic and forward-looking, free from the rigidity of European society. While giving lectures across the country and considering a position at Caltech, Einstein discovered his first real taste of America. He wrote, "I've been staying for 2 months in this country of contradictions and surprises where one alternates between admiration and head-shaking." The Hopi Indians gave Einstein the name, the Great Relative. He was wooed by Hollywood and befriended by Charlie Chaplin, and good-naturedly accepted the publicity and fanfare that would accompany his presence everywhere. Chaplin took Einstein to a premiere of his film City Lights. When the crowds surrounded their limousine, Einstein asked, "What does it mean?" Chaplin replied, "Nothing." Einstein's first trip to the United States 2 years earlier was prompted at the request of the Zionist leader Chaim Weizmann for the purpose of raising funds for the planned Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He was sympathetic to preserving a Jewish culture and community and had made a special visit to Palestine in 1923. He was drawn to the spirit of the young Zionists, but never chose to live there. His path would lead to America.
The question why he chose America as his final destination may even have a rather prosaic answer. Where could he go to? It may be the circumstance that just at that time, a man in New Jersey called Bamberger established an institute for advanced studies in which the members would really have no duties incumbent upon them. I know because I've had that distinction. You don't have to do anything if you don't want to. You don't have to publish if you don't want to. You don't have to give lectures if you don't want to. You're entirely alone with the ability to think, to speculate, not to think, not to speculate. And I think this appealed to his libertarian feeling that he didn't want to be enclosed.
At the Institute, working with 2 assistants, Einstein continued his grand search for a single theory that would encompass all of nature. A grand scheme that would unify both the large forces of the planets and the small forces of the atom.
He worked very intensely with 1 or 2 or 3 people at most, and had very little contact on a day-to-day basis with the other younger members of the Institute.
He liked to talk about his work, his ideas, and see how another person would react to it.
The general method, which we wanted to follow, usually was suggested by Einstein. The detailed procedures which we used, well, were sometimes proposed by Einstein and sometimes by Peter Bergman or myself. There were innumerable jokes and misunderstandings about Bergman and Bargmann. But it is very important to stress that we worked not on a basis of master and disciples, but whatever we had to say would be taken very seriously and discussed just as thoroughly as if it was Einstein's idea.
What he liked was a resonance.
Einstein had little contact with the younger physicists at the Institute who were caught up in the exciting new field of quantum mechanics. With quantum's main proponent, Niels Bohr, Einstein had a 20-year argument. He stubbornly held to his own beliefs.
He had a certain type of arrogance. He had a certain belief that, not that he said it in those words, but that is the way I read him personally, that he had a sort of special pipeline to God, you know. He would always say that God doesn't play dice, to which Niels Bohr would reply, but how do you know what God's doing? You know. He had these images of somewhere that his notion of simplicity was the one that was going to prevail.
And this, of course, explains his difficulty in accepting quantum mechanics with its uncertainty, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which introduces, Einstein thought, the idea that chance is involved in the physical world.
In fact, in his first part of his life, that when he did his real important work, his notions of simplicity were the guide to the 20th century insofar as science is concerned. Later on, I think he was just, you know, he was completely off base. I mean, if Einstein had stopped doing physics in the year 1925 and had gone fishing, he would be just as beloved, just as great, and it would not have made a damn bit of difference.